Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me to introduce myself. My name is Anisa Risyafitri, NIM 2005-3004. On this occasion, I will discuss about sexual harassment to fulfill the final task, subject of English business. Violence against women and cases of sexual harassment are still a big problem in Indonesia. Komnas Perempuan data shows 4,000 violence against women in Indonesia from January to September 2021. Minister of Education, Culture, Research and Technology, Nadiem Makarim, state that a number of data indicate that there is currently a violent emergency situation in universities. Nadiem cite Komnas Perempuan data throughout 2015 for 2020, which shows of all complaints of sexual violence originating from educational institutions. As many as 27% of cases occur in universities. The Ministry of Education and Culture survey in 2020 also stated that 77% of lecturers state that sexual violence had occurred on campus, and 63% didn't report cases they knew to the campus. The majority of victims of sexual violence are women. Next, I want to explain about the definitions of sexual harassment. According BKKBN, Badan Kependudukan dan Keluarga Berencana Nasional, sexual harassment is all kinds of behavior that connotes or leads to sexual things that are carried out unilaterally and are not expected by the person being targeted, causing negative reaction such as shame, anger, hate, offense, and so on in individuals who are victims of harassment. In other words, sexual harassment is abuse of sexual behavior or sexual behavior deviation, request to perform sexual act, invitation to perform sexual act, and request to that. Number 3 is verbal or physical statement of doing or making gesture depicting sexual act. Message that display sexuality explicit content in print or electronic form, SMS, email, screen, poster, CD, and each other. Unwanted action. The victims has stated that the behavior is undesirable. The recipient feels insulted, offended, and or pressured by the act. The perpetrator should be able to feel that the target, the victim, will be offended, humiliated, and or pressured by the act. Number 5 is physical behavior, such as touching, kissing, patting, pinching, or physical violence such as rape each other. Next, degrading sexual behavior such as glancing or staring at someone's body part. Next is types of sexual harassment. One is gender harassment. Giving derogatory comments towards a certain gender can be categorized as sexual harassment. For example, harassment, humiliation, or demeaning of women, both in the real world and on social media. There are several examples of gender harassment that can occur, from derogatory comments, image, and writing that demean women, to jokes or humor that offend women that make anyone who hears them feel embarrassed. Number 2 is seductive behavior. Sexual harassment can also occur due to teasing behavior, both in public place and in the work or school environment. Starting from unwanted sexual invitation, asking to go out in a coercive way, sending annoying message and call, and other invitation. Number 3 is sexual coercion. Forcing someone to engage in sexual activity is also a type of sexual harassment that can occur, especially if this coercion is also accompanied by the threat of certain punishment and make the victim feel afraid and doesn't have the power to refuse the invitation. In the word of word, the usual threats include negative job evaluation, threats of job termination, to accusations, and gossip circulation in work environment. Number 4 is promising rewards. Sexual harassment is also an invitation to have sex with the promise of certain reward. This can be done either openly or privately. In some cases, the promised reward may never be delivered. Number 5 is deliberate physical touch. Serious sexual offense such as intentionally touching, feeling, or intentionally sticking certain body parts. This can also include sexual assault that is carried out when the victim is careless or lacks the ability to fight back. Next is how to avoid sexual harassment. Number 1 is avoid lonely place. Usually, the perpetrators of sexual harassment look for a quiet place to carry out their actions. Although sometimes the perpetrators are also desperate to carry out their action in public place. Therefore, for women as much as possible to avoid lonely place. If you have to go through this place, you should ask to be accompanied by a friend or closest person. Number 2 is stay alert to the surrounding environment. We must always increase our vigilance wherever we are, so that if there are perpetrators of sexual harassment who want to commit an act, we can immediately report it and prevent the act of sexual harassment. Number 3 is arm yourself to increase self-defense. For women, they should start learning self-defense so that we can avoid harassment and we can defend ourselves. We should also arm ourselves with chili spray or laser stun gun flashing so that we can immobile perpetrators who want to commit acts of sexual harassment. Number 4 is avoid traveling with new people. We should not be easily persuaded by the seduction of other people we just met. Moreover, the new person we knew through social media. We must avoid this so that unwanted things don't happen. Number 5 is don't go alone where you are far away. For women who want to travel long distance, they should ask to be accompanied by the closest person, for example, a friend who are always trust, because the perpetrators of sexual harassment usually target their victims who travel alone. Next, a pathway for reporting sexual harassment. Number 1 is immediately do a visa at the nearest health service. This is used as evidence of harassment. Number 2 is report it to the nearest police station and don't forget to bring evidence. Number 3 is report to the ombudsman. If your sexual harassment report is ignored by the police. Next, you can also bring your report to the POLDA level and report it in the contact center, a collaboration platform between Komnas Perempuan, Telkom, Telstra, and IPSCAP. After sexual harassment happens, victims have trauma of sexual harassment. Mental Health America revealed sexual harassment can cause depression, anxiety disorder, post-trauma stress disorder, PTSD, and eating disorder. One of the things that can also be experienced by victims is rape trauma syndrome. Reported from Washington University, rape trauma syndrome is associated with PTSD, mental disorder caused by sexual violence. Generally, people with rape trauma syndrome experience symptoms of behavioral, emotional, cognitive, and personal disorder. Reporting from the King County Sexual Assault Resources Center, there are a series of symptoms experienced by victims which are adjusted to the stage experience. There are two groups of reaction, namely the acute stage and disorganization. The acute stage generally occurs immediately after the disturbance, while disorganization is a fairly long process after experiencing the disturbance. Generally, victims of sexual harassment experience symptoms such as feeling uncomfortable in crowds, having difficulty building trust with new people, experiencing panic attack, and excessive anxiety, depression, and experiencing fear when it comes to touching other people. Next is a wise way to deal with the trauma of sexual harassment. In addition to intense assistance, overcoming trauma due to sexual harassment experience can be done by 1. Don't blame yourself. Victims of sexual harassment generally often blame themselves for what happened to them. Instead, it's best to stop blaming yourself because this disturbance is not the victim's fault. There is nothing wrong after the victim is living a new life, doing fun things and self-care. Number 2 is get therapy if needed. Reporting from the Good Therapy website, there are therapies that can be run to overcome the trauma you experience after sexual harassment. You can do deep therapy, cognitive therapy, and eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing therapy. This therapy is used to reduce trauma or the victim's memory of the event that took place. Number 3 is to find friends to exchange stories. Several victims in the case in England revealed that the victims tried to cover up the case from the people closest to him. In fact, exchanging stories with trusted relatives or professionals can help to overcome the trauma of sexual harassment experience. There's nothing wrong with visiting a psychologist and the nearest hospital so you can exchange story and deal with the trauma you experience with the right person. And the last is teach children with sexual education from an early age. Sexual education or sex education is an activity to teach about reproductive health. The purpose of this activity is to raise awareness about the importance of reproductive health so that acts of sexual harassment and infectious disease can be prevented. That's the material that I described. I hope this video can help viewers understand more about what sexual harassment is, how to avoid it, report perpetrators to victims of sexual harassment, and help victims who are experiencing trauma. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.